friends, enemies, those still under review. Allie. Let's talk about the Jews. Now, that is a sentence that is normally not accompanied by good things. Germany. But when you think of Jews, normally, or when you think of the Jewish, you normally think of the people in Israel, right? Israelis, Palestinians, people in the Middle East, right? You think of Jesus, those kind of people. What you don't often think about is Eastern European, Mongolian Jews. So let's talk about the Khazar Khanate. Crack acquired. So, the Khazars are a Turco-Mongolic people who lived just north of the Caucasus Mountains, so in southern Russia. Now, the Khazars invade this area and basically settle there for about 300 years, and we don't know a whole lot about them because none of the things they wrote down have been preserved. So all we have to go on is what other people wrote about them. And most of the things we have about them are from when they already no longer existed. So our two main sources on them were these two Muslim writers in the 1100s-ish. So let me tell you a story. So for the Khazars, their leader is called a Khagan. So one day, the Khagan of the Khazar Khanate says, "People, we need a new religion. Our current gods aren't working." So he invites 3 holy men. A Christian, a Muslim, and a Jew. And he tells these 3 men to make their case on why he should convert to their religion. And the Muslim and the Jew both make their cases. And they both argue constantly. And the Jew simply stays silent. And through some weird chicanery, because I don't remember the whole story, eventually the Khagan picks being Jewish. Now, we know for a fact that the Khazars were Jewish. We don't know how thoroughly they embraced that religion, and we don't know how many of them embraced it. So we know at least the ruling family were Jewish. We know probably some of the high-ranking nobles or chieftains were Jewish. But we don't actually know how many of the lay people, the people working the fields, herding the cattle, herding the horses, all that. We don't know if they still worship their native religion or Judaism. So there's a lot of weird things going on about the Khazars. And we also don't really know what happened to them. So there's like 3-ish main theories that I've been able to find. Theory number 1, the Nazi theory. Oh, this video's already been demonetized. The Nazi theory. So the Nazis believed that the Jews in Europe came from the Khazars fleeing westward. Now, there's a huge flaw in this. The fact that the Khazars fell to an invasion from the west, so why would they flee towards their enemies? So theory number 2 is the mountain theory. There are people who live in the Caucasus Mountains who are Jewish and whose origin aren't really clear. But we also know that ethnically they aren't Turco-Mongolic. So that kind of rules out that theory. And then the third theory is... and the third theory is they migrated east. They went back to the land that they came from. Crack break. So they go back east and we never hear from them again. But, so they controlled a huge swath of territory in southern Russia. And they were constantly butting heads with the Kievan Rus, or the descendants of Vikings who had settled in Russia. So the Kievan Rus eventually unite long enough to launch a massive scale invasion into the Khazars. So they mount this huge army, and head deep into Khazar lands and burn the capital. So then they all disappear, basically. And despite having such a huge influence on this area for such a long time, it's strange how little of an impact they actually left. It's crazy to think about. So their destruction happens around the 970s AD, and within 100 years, there are no Khazars anywhere. We have no clue what happened to them. But here's something interesting. So the Caspian Sea is a large inland lake. It's not a sea, it's a lake. So the Caspian Sea is a large inland lake in Central Asia. And a lot of the Turks who had once lived in that area don't call it the Caspian Sea. They call it something else. They call it a variation. Now, there's multiple languages that do this. But in Turkish, the language of Turkey, they call it something approximating the word Khazar Lake. Something to think about. Have fun, bully Sam, and remember, Sora, my songs know what you did in the dark.